Most of you know that I grew up in a different denomination than the United Church of Canada. I grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, a bunch of Dutch Presbyterians who mostly immigrated to Canada after World War II. But growing up in the Christian Reformed Church about 50 years ago now, I had to go to Heidelberg catechism classes every Wednesday night, all through high school for an hour. The minister, the poor guy, taught most of those classes from 6 till 10 p.m. And so there we were, sitting around a big table in the church's council room, pea shooters underneath, passing notes, popping bubble gum at just the wrong moment for the minister, whispering, and sometimes we engaged in outright rebellion. This was before iPhones, so none of us were sitting there prayerfully. Our parents made us go. We hated it. But what's interesting is that eventually, by the time I was confirmed at age 17, I knew the catechism. Somehow it happened. I knew the catechism backwards and forwards. I had much of it memorized, in fact. But do you know what a catechism is? The word catechism comes by way of Latin from Greek words that mean to speak down to. So catechisms are summaries of church doctrine that are designed to be spoken down to the people in the pew so that they will learn what it is they believe if they didn't know. So the Heidelberg Catechism that I studied was actually written in 1563, 450 years ago. Heidelberg was a town in Germany that was surrounded by a sea of Catholic and Lutheran territories, and they were all isolated by themselves. So the Calvinists in Heidelberg felt like, well, they needed to defend their faith and they needed to be really clear about what it was, and so they decided to write the Heidelberg Catechism. Almost everybody I knew growing up in the Christian Reformed Church had large swaths of this catechism memorized. The way they designed it was this. There were 52 Lord's Days in the catechism. So actually 52 little chapters, so that one chapter could be preached every Sunday of the year. And I actually followed that practice in my first two congregations for 8 years. I'd write one sermon on a scriptural passage in the morning, and then I would preach a second sermon on the appropriate Lord's Day summary of the doctrines in the afternoon. You don't know how good I have it here in the United Church. Now, most denominations have catechisms or similar faith statements, and the United Church does too, some modern, some ancient. But I always thought that the Heidelberg Catechism was different than most catechisms and most statements of faith because it's nearly poetic, and it has an ironic, peaceful tone. Probably because these Calvinists felt threatened by all these people around them and they didn't want to, be too contrary. So, for example, when many catechisms begin with questions like, who is God? Or what is the meaning of life? Or what must you do with your life? The Heidelberg Catechism begins in a totally different way with this question. What is your only comfort in life and in death? And the answer, which everybody in the Christian Reformed Church knows, begins with these words: that I'm not my own, but I belong, body and soul, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. So the Heidelberg Catechism begins with comfort. What interests me most, though, on this Thanksgiving Sunday is how the Heidelberg Catechism handles Thanksgiving. That is, how it handles gratitude, which, of course, is a synonym for Thanksgiving. You see, in the Heidelberg Catechism, we are taught that we must not merely feel thankful, but rather in all things to express gratitude with concrete actions that flow from your feelings. So it works like this, the Catechism. It has 3 long sections. The first one is on misery, and that's about the things that we need to be comforted from because the world is a hard place. And 450 years ago, it was a lot harder place than it is now. So the Catechism begins by explaining the human condition, misery. Next, a large part of what follows is about how God deals with the problem of human misery. And this section of the Catechism explains Jesus' life and death, the Apostles' Creed, the sacraments, and the subtitle of this second big section of the Catechism is called Deliverance, how we are delivered from our misery. But then the third section, misery, deliverance, and finally the last subtitle in the Catechism is gratitude, or in some translations, thanksgiving. So the Catechism concludes with 20 Lord's Days, 20 Sundays worth of instruction on gratitude, on thanksgiving. That is, nearly half of the Catechism explains how we should live in gratitude for the example and teachings of Jesus. We can do so, says the Catechism, in 2 main ways. First, by keeping the 10 Commandments, and secondly, by living the Lord's Prayer. It's the section on the 10 Commandments, as you know from David's reading, that interests me most. You see, what's so interesting in this Catechism is that instead of focusing on thou shalt not, which is what many of the commandments are, instead of focusing on thou shalt not as a way of expressing your gratitude, this part of the Heidelberg Catechism turns each of the 10 Commandments into a permission. 10 little poetic essays on how we can shape our lives positively around doing gratitude in concrete actions rather than just thinking about it or feeling it inside. So, for example, I'm going to give you 3 examples from 3 of the commands. In the 6th command, you shall not murder. Keeping this commandment, says the Catechism, obviously means that you shouldn't kill anybody. But then it goes on to say, and you shouldn't belittle anybody, and you shouldn't hate anybody, and you shouldn't insult anybody. That's the thou shalt not part. But then positively, thou shalt not murder, says the Catechism, is our permission to express gratitude concretely by being patient with others, by being peace-loving with others, by being gentle with others, by being merciful and friendly, even to our enemies. That's exercising your thanksgiving muscle, not letting it get rusty. Again, the 8th commandment says you shall not steal, and the Catechism says that negatively that means, besides not taking stuff from people, remember this is 450 years ago, you shouldn't counterfeit coins, you shouldn't charge excessive interest, and you shouldn't use inaccurate measures. But positively, not stealing is permission to express your gratitude concretely, quote, by doing whatever I can for my neighbor's good, by treating others as I would like them to treat me, the golden rule, and by working faithfully, that is, working at a job faithfully, so that I may share with those in need. That's thanksgiving. Finally, one more example. The 9th commandment says we should not bear false witness, or we shouldn't lie. The Catechism says that negatively this means I should twist no one's words, I should not gossip, I should not slander. But positively, a life of gratitude suggests that concretely I should love the truth. I should speak it candidly. I should openly acknowledge the truth to guard and advance my neighbor's good name. Something a few of our world leaders could learn from. That's Thanksgiving. So, do you catch the flavor of this, though? The catechism I grew up with, for all of what I now see as its doctrinal narrowness, there's much in it that I don't really like anymore. Nevertheless, the catechism makes a really good point here. The catechism treats gratitude, what we call thanksgiving, as a life-defining verb, as stuff to do every day, rather than as something to think about once in a while. Well, I used to sit with my friends around that church council table years ago, not very happy about learning the catechism, but somehow, in spite of our fidgeting and rowdiness, the lesson about gratitude finally sunk in for me. The Christian life is not about the thou shalt nots. The Christian life is about permission to do good things for our family, friends, neighbors, and even to do good things for our neighbors all the way around the world. This Thanksgiving, many of you are going to be sitting around tables too with family, friends, or perhaps even with strangers at a soup kitchen or out of the cold event. There will be fidgeting and rowdiness among the children gathered at the table, and likely there will be adults around that table who don't get along very well with some of the others around the table. But it's Thanksgiving, so you have to. So what happens next? Well, how about this? Instead of just feeling thanks or imagining that you're grateful deep inside for your blessings, do you think you could commit to acting it out in that situation, for example? Could you let your gratitude breathe? By what you say about others, by how you do things to lift others, by how you heal breaches, or at least try, and generally treat whoever you meet with dignity and kindness and like they are precious. Give your gratitude permission to be expansive by what you do, say, actions, money, by what you share, by what you do with your time and influence. Influence at home or in business or in the public square. We have a lot to be thankful for, don't we? You know, it's been in the news this week that unemployment in Canada is at near historic lows. And as much as we do hear about the troubling rise in handgun violence in Toronto, it's also true that across Canada, most crime rates are also at historic lows, at least per capita. And that's true in Canada too. Even, in fact, about a month ago, Toronto was named as the third safest large city in the whole world. We enjoy a social safety net. And if we don't need it, we probably know someone who does, or a relative who does, or a client who does. We have great medical care that doesn't bankrupt us, which is not uncommon south of the border. And if you doubt that, just read Reverend Bacon's words about the care he received at Sunnybrook when he got his bypass surgery. We have government pensions. We have highways that are in good repair and safe to drive, and I can tell you from traveling around much of the developing world, that is rare, and we don't even think about it. We have a business climate that has allowed many of us to succeed doing what we like to do. Some Americans, I'm an American, you know that, I'm dual citizen, but some Americans may think they need to make America great again. But I'm telling you, Canada is great now, thank God. And what's more, on the side of religion, here in this church, we can give thanks for the opportunity to explore divine meaning for our lives. We can give thanks for the example of Jesus to inspire us. We can give thanks for being free to talk about morality, for a community of friends and neighbors who look after us when we end up in the hospital. We can give thanks for choirs, for art shows, for other music like the bells, for volunteer opportunities, and dare I say it, we can give thanks for decent sermons. Well, especially from our new minister. You know, we have a lot to be thankful for, and I could go on and on. And what we need to do in response is to turn that gratitude inside out, from a felt thing into a verb, from a feeling into an action. The possibilities are just absolutely endless if I would wake up every day and think gratitude. I mean, when you brush up too closely to someone in the subway and it doesn't smell good, maybe you don't need to scowl. When you walk by a homeless person in the street, even though you know it doesn't solve the problem, you might drop a toonie in that cup. When you're asked to support Girl Guides by buying cookies, you do. When you vote, you do so for your neighbor's welfare rather than for your own wallet. When you go to work and wonder not only how you can increase your firm's bottom line, but how you can increase your firm's social return on investment, that's thanksgiving by exercising concrete actions that focus on good for others just as much as it's focused on good for ourselves. When you volunteer at the Royal Ontario Museum or at the hospital or at the food bank, or when you make donations to all these good causes, that's all thanksgiving. It really isn't that hard. Thanksgiving. It's a verb. Every moment we live is an adventure because it's ripe with the opportunity to exercise our gratitude. Gratitude, it is the permission Jesus has given us, not merely to feel satisfied, but from out of our largesse to share of ourselves for others.